Let there be light. That's good. Light is good.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to Meet the Candidates. Thank you for coming. We are Facebook Live, just so everyone knows, and we're also on Zoom. So if you have anyone at home that wants to watch this too, tell them Walton New York Chamber Facebook, and then Zoom. The Zoom links you can find through our Facebook. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, especially our candidates. Thank you for coming. Ron Golly, thank you very much for moderating. Nate Jameson, thank you and the Walton Music House for these microphones, because I feel like that's going to really help so everyone can hear. And also thank you Wayne Bank for providing lots of pens, some sanitizer and masks up front. And thank you everyone on the Walton Chamber Board. We all worked together and made this event happen. And also thank you the Walton Grange for hosting and letting us be here. This is a good space for us and we're glad to be part of it. I'm going to hand off now to Ron Golly, our host, and he's going to introduce everybody and we're going to go from there.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for the Meet the Candidates. Welcome to our Meet the Candidates for next month's Town of Walton elections. I'd like to introduce the panel tonight. Joe Setta, Supervisor. Kevin Armstrong, who was up for election for as well, an unopposed election this year, and also for Supervisor Lillian Brown Burdick. Thank you to the people, for everyone who's with us tonight in the audience, as well as our live stream, following us on Facebook, as well as Zoom. Tonight we are pleased to announce the candidates also on the ballot for next month's election, unopposed for Town Council, Dr. Luis Rodriguez Bentecourt, along with Jeff Ofnick, who is running unopposed for Town of Highway Superintendent. Would you join me now and please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Each candidate will make a 3-minute opening statement. We made the decision ahead of time, and people drew straws. Lillian Brown will be the first one to speak, followed by Joe Setta and Kevin Armstrong. Each candidate will make a 3-minute opening statement. The timekeeper will provide a signal when 30 seconds remain, and again when time has expired. After opening statements have been completed, I will begin reading written questions to the candidate in revolving order. All candidates will have their opportunity to answer each question. Candidates will have 2 minutes to provide their spoken response to each question. Once again, Cheryl, the timekeeper, will signal when 30 seconds remain and when time expires. Thank you, Cheryl. At the conclusion of the written questions and response segment, audience members may ask questions directly to the candidates. Questioners must stand, state their name, and state who their question is directed to. Questions are limited to 1 minute. Speeches from the floor will not be permitted. Issues, not personalities, are to be addressed tonight. No personal or abusive questions will be permitted. Candidate responses will be limited to 2 minutes. At the conclusion of the questions, the candidates will have the opportunity for a 2-minute closing statement in the same order as the opening statement. And with that in mind, our first question of the night goes to both supervisor candidates. How do you feel? Thank you, Joe. Before we get started with our opening question, we'll hear the opening statements, and we'll begin with Lillian Brown.
Are we working? Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight and for your investment in the election process. Thank you to the Walton Chamber and the Grange for hosting and sponsoring tonight's event. I'm a 21-year resident of Walton and deeply invested in our community, having raised my children here and now watching my grandchildren grow up here. I'm a small business owner. I'm a licensed outdoor guide and operate a small marketing and promotion company. I have a background in public service with a career in the court system, writing for the local newspaper, and as a former Walton trustee and deputy mayor. This election is not about Republicans or Democrats. What happens on the national political stage has very little bearing on what happens locally and does not reflect my values. I am running on the Walton First Line as an independent, and I have been endorsed by the Democratic Party, so you'll find me on 2 lines. Attempts to align my candidacy with left-wing radicalism detract from the real issues that face our community and create further division between our neighbors. I have been a lifelong Republican and left the party 3 years ago when I saw how town and county GOP treated one another and turn on one another when they have a different opinion. That is not something that I am aligned with. I believe we should respect one another and each other's views and engage in civil discourse without character assassination. Anyone who runs for public office should be commended for wanting to improve our community and the quality of life that we all enjoy. Like myself, I believe that my opponent truly wants what's best for our town. However, I am the better qualified candidate to lead Walton for a number of reasons. My decisions and votes will always reflect Walton's needs first. I am the leader that Walton needs. Walton needs a spokesperson and a leader who is fearless in the face of pressure. I am that leader. Walton needs a leader who understands that state and federal funding are tied to developing relationships across party or political lines. I am that leader. Through my position as a programs manager for the Delaware County Chamber of Commerce, I have developed positive relationships with our Senate, Assembly, and Congressional representative, as well as the New York State Comptroller's Office. I am the leader that Walton needs. The relationship between the town and village has broken down. We must come together and work together to make Walton the best that it can possibly be. That means setting aside our own wish list to represent Walton residents. My track record shows that I can and will work with anyone, regardless of their background. I am not running against anyone. I am running for Walton. Please vote on November 2nd.
Our next opening statement with Joe Setta.
Thank you, Ron. I also want to thank everyone for showing up tonight, and thank you for the Chamber for hosting this event. Long-standing hosting by the Chamber of this event is truly appreciated by the members of the community. So again, thank you. In March 2018, I was elected to the village board as a trustee. And forgive me if I look like I may get a little emotional on my next statement, but 3 months later in June of 2018, as a member of the Walton Emergency Squad, I responded to a call that was identified as our supervisor, my friend, my fire department colleague, Charlie Gregory. We all know what happened. It was a significant emotional event for me personally, and an emotional event for our community. A couple days later, I received a phone call that they wanted to talk to me at the town hall. Still, I didn't understand what was going on at that time. I went to the town hall and I sat with 4 town council that have numerous terms elected by the people of the town of Walton a number of times for many years. And they unanimously asked me if I would continue that tradition of being the town supervisor. I resigned from the village trust as a village trustee and swore in as the town supervisor, appointed. I am a lifelong resident of the town of Walton. My entire adult life has been nothing but public service. I've had 36 years in the military, almost 10 years as a fire department member. Pressure. I've been in numerous situations where there's a lot more pressure that can happen in this position. I know how to handle pressure. My family has had a business in our community for over 100 years, continuing to this day. I have a vested interest in our community. I've always had a vested interest in community. Raised my children here, and I have a new grandson. Please, get the word out to vote, and I would appreciate your support on November 2nd. Thank you.
Our next opening statement with town council, current town council member and seeking re-election, Kevin Armstrong.
Good evening. I would also like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event, and for the Grange for having it here. I am also a lifetime resident of Walton. I've owned a family-operated truck parts business for over 20 years, which we closed in 2000. I have served the town of Walton since the early 90s, first as a member of the Town Planning and Zoning Board, and I ran for town council in 1996 and was elected and been a member of the council since. I've also raised 2 kids in Walton, and Walton is very dear to my heart. Some of the accomplishments that I feel that our board has done over the term that I've been on there is one of the things we did was establish a dedicated equipment reserve fund. We've used federal surplus equipment program aggressively. The town has purchased loaders, graders, bulldozer, 10-wheel trucks, forklift, shop equipment, and pickup trucks. Both of these programs have allowed the town to have an up-to-date and dependable fleet and some of the best roads in Delaware County, while saving the taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. Other cost-cutting initiatives have included installing 2 waste oil burners in our highway garage and switching our town employees from a traditional insurance plan to a high-deductible plan with the establishment of a health reserve account to offset their deductibles. We have secured numerous grants for flood mitigation in the town and the village, as well as to purchase equipment and for building repairs. We established a senior citizens property tax exemption for those that meet income guidelines. We expanded cell service in Walton for the cell towers on town property, which has also brought in tens of thousands of dollars in revenue to the town. We did the first reevaluation of property value since the 1970s. We've established shared agreements with numerous towns in the village of Walton. I'm very proud that we have always stayed under the 2% increase cap that the state had instituted in the past. These accomplishments have been the result of the dedicated teamwork of our current supervisor, Joe Setta, past supervisors, our town council, past council members, as well as our town clerk, Rhonda Williams, and her deputy clerks, our past highway superintendent, Walt Geidel, and current superintendent, Jeff Ovnick, and his crew. Our former tax assessor, Fran Zudovic, and current assessor, Penny Haddad. Our code enforcement officer, Steve Dutcher, town attorney, Carly Wallace, and our former attorney, Francis Wood. It's been my honor to work with these people and serve the town of Walton for over the past 30 years, and I hope I can continue to do so in the future. And I urge everybody to go out and exercise your right to vote in November. Thank you.
Thank you to the candidates for their opening statements. Our first question to Lillian Brown Burdick. Why did you leave the village board?
I'm
sorry, can you repeat that?
Why did you leave the village board?
Thank you for the question. That was contained in my opening statements, and I removed it in the interest of time. I ended up leaving the village board after serving a term and a half as village trustee and the village's first deputy mayor, who was a female. I left because I did receive a promotion in my job in the unified court system, and it took me out of the area, which did not allow me the time to get back here in time for the meetings. This does not detract from my commitment to serve in this role. I have a different work situation currently that allows me the flexibility to continue to serve the residents of Walton. Thank you.
Our next question is addressed to both supervisor candidates. What does holding an elected position mean to you? Again, Lillian.
I think Joe goes first.
Serving the people is an honor that I hold very deeply. Again, public service my whole entire adult life. Continuing that service is a prime objective of mine. When I retired from the military, allowed me more time to expand my duties in the fire department and EMS services. My sole purpose is to help the people of the town of Walton, either through the fire department, EMS services, or serving as your town supervisor. It's ingrained in me since I've been 18 years old. So I have that vested interest. Thank you.
I don't disagree with Joe that the role of supervisor is one of public service, but I also see the role of supervisor as the chief operating officer of the town, who also represents the interests of Walton at the Delaware County Board of Supervisors. And as such, Walton carries very heavy weighted voting with the Board of Supervisors, and that is no small feat. And we need to keep that in mind when we are making decisions on behalf of Walton at the county level. We cannot forget our residents. I also see the role of supervisor as someone who not just keeps in mind that we are here to serve our residents, but also to do our best to serve the residents' needs, not government needs, not our own personal needs, but the needs of the town. I'd like to see the town thrive and grow, expand its tax base, and not on the backs of the taxpayers with unfunded mandates. Thank you.
Our next question, once again, to both supervisor candidates. This time, Lillian Brown-Burdick will go first. How do you feel about bail reform?
Thank you. That's a great question, having had a lifelong career in the court system and working in felony, county, and Supreme Courts. Regardless of what I think about bail reform is the law of the land. And I do say, based upon my coverage with the newspaper and through my role in the unified court system, bail reform was needed. That being said, I totally support our police officers and our law enforcement. However, there are always opportunities to learn, to grow, and to do things differently to protect our communities and to help our community thrive. I think bail reform was necessary. We certainly do not have the issues here in Walton, New York that we see in New York City or in other places that are more metro than we are. It would have been nice to include some law enforcement officials in the decision making, which was not done at the state level. And I regret that that was not done. Some more work needs to be done with regard to bail reform, but again, this is the law of the land, and we need to comply with the law And if we don't like the laws, we need to engage our state representatives to advocate for a change in the law.
I don't agree with bail reform at all. I get emails every day from police agencies, particularly Delaware County Sheriff's Office, that make arrests for violent criminal activity, and because of bail reform, they are released on their own recognizance. And there's been numerous documentation that repeat offenders happen. I believe that bail reform should be repealed and readdressed until it is agreed upon by the whole state. That bail reform was specifically targeting New York City, had nothing to do with upstate. We are a totally different entity. It doesn't work that way up here. I just feel that, again, and I have talked to our Senator, Mike Martucci, and our Assemblyman, Joe Angelino, and I've discussed that specific point. What do we need to do to repeal the bail reform and readdress it that would fit both upstate and the metropolitan area's needs? Thank you.
Our next question once again goes to Joe Setta and Lillian Brown Burdick. If you were re-elected or elected, what would be your first priority and why? Joe?
Walton has had a challenge with volunteerism, specifically with EMS. And I have been working with an organization to establish a paid EMS service, and will continue to work with that organization. We have a process that this committee's been going through, and we've addressed it at the town board level, to provide a paid ambulance service to our residents. That would be one of a continued priority for my next term. At the county level, they are looking at creating a paid service at the county level. It's in its infancy in planning, but I'm going to do everything I can to work with that committee locally to establish an EMS service, paid EMS service for our residents. I've heard a number of people say that it really isn't much of a priority until you need it. When you make that 911 call for an ambulance, everything changes. I've seen it for many years. It changes a lot of people's opinion. So that's one of my first priorities. Thank you.
Lillian Brown Burdick?
I concur with Joe that EMS service is something that needs to be addressed, but not just in Walton. This is county-wide. It was proposed at the town board meeting a few months ago by the supervisor and one council member that our American Rescue Fund plans were an appropriate use for establishing a new ambulance service, a paid ambulance service. I disagree with that. Those funds are not to be used for something that could be paid for with other funds. I do agree that it needs to be addressed. I have spoken with the members of the ambulance squad who tell me they do not want to go to a paid service and would like to be able to continue their volunteer efforts. The second thing that I would like to have addressed is the imposition and updating of a comprehensive plan. Thirdly, I would make sure that we are in compliance with the New York State Comptroller's Office regarding incompatible duties with the town clerk and bookkeeper, which the town has been written up for several times starting in 2016. Thank you.
The next question this evening comes to Lillian Brown Burdick. Within your campaign material, you stated, Walton first. Could you please elaborate on this and tell us just how you would make Walton first?
I'm happy to. I'd like to give one example. Decisions should not be, and statements should not be made at the county level, at the town level, where one thing is said, and at the county level, where another thing is said, or nothing is said. For example, with regard to streamside land acquisition recently proposed by the DEC on behalf of the DEP, it was our own supervisor with the Delhi supervisor and the Harpersville supervisor who invited DEC personnel in to give a presentation so more information could be presented about the good reasons for land acquisition. Now, in 2018, the Board of Supervisors passed a resolution stating there was to be no more land acquisition in Delaware County. The Walton Flood Commission came out with the same statement, as did the town board and the village board. So putting Walton first means putting things, putting the needs of Walton that will help Walton to thrive at the forefront of all our decisions and not making decisions to gain political favor. That's just one of the reasons, and one of the reasons that I'm calling my campaign Walton First.
Joe Sutter, would you like to respond?
There was a meeting at the CWC with a gentleman who is managing that streamside acquisition program for Schoharie County. The number of supervisors were there. He was invited to Delaware County Board of Supervisors just to give some information. Did not say anything more than that. I said, okay, if you want to come, come. If you were at that meeting, which of course was Zoomed, it was inherently obvious that most of the board was against streamside acquisition. Again, the DEC for the DEP cannot mandate that. It's a community process. The community votes to either allow it or disallow it. It has nothing to do with the total county as a whole. It's each individual community. And I personally do not agree with the streamside acquisition. I would vote against it when it comes up at the town board meeting. It's specifically for hamlets and villages, which the town is not part of. So it would have to be either, for instance, Trout Creek or the village of Walton. That's where they're targeting. It's not the town of Walton. But if it comes up within the town, then we will address it then. But I'll go on record now saying I am against any further land acquisition by New York City. Thank you.
The next question to Kevin Armstrong.
Finally.
It was just a matter of time. Kevin, as a board member, could you please explain your role in the decision-making for the local government?
Well, ever since I've been on the board, I vote for what I think is right. I'm not swayed by other board members. If I think it's in the best interest of Walton, then I'm okay with it. If I don't, I'm not. Our decisions, or my decisions, have always been, I'm pretty conservative as far as spending money. We have always tried to hold the line on our budget when we decide on buying equipment, different projects that we do. We have taken pretty aggressive action on flood mitigation projects, which I'm all for, and I think that saves us in the long run. So basically, like I said, I base on my decision on what I think is right, and I also take into consideration, opinions from the rest of the board and the public. Thank you.
Our next question, once again, to the supervisor candidates. What are your plans to bring high-speed internet to the area? I believe it's Joe Sutter's turn to go first.
Delhi Telephone Company's been in the process of putting high-speed internet into a number of communities around Delaware County. They received a federal grant years ago, and they've been in the process. And to date, most of the main trunk lines on town roads have been installed. There's going to be a process of hooking them up to the individual customers. It's a long and arduous process to do that, but that has already it's been a couple years since they started that project. So thanks to a federal grant, that project has been started years ago. So broadband will be available to most of the town residents, if not now, but shortly. So we have it here. Thank you.
Lillian?
Again, Joe is not incorrect. We do have wide coverage for broadband and high-speed internet. However, it's not DTC or Delhi Telephone Company that is managing the project. It's the Delaware County Broadband Initiative that is composed of Delhi Telephone Company, Margaretville Telephone Company, and DCEC, where the three are working together. And that's a perfect example of collaborative effort to help our communities thrive. What we really need to see, rather than expanded, although we do need some expansion of broadband service, is cell phone service. We have very poor cell phone service in our community, and in other parts of the county, to be frank. One of the ways that I propose that this be addressed is through my role in the Delaware County Chamber. We have talked to Verizon to see if we could interest them in coming in and putting receivers or repeaters up on our Delaware County communication towers for emergency services. Sadly, because of the infrastructure costs and because of the fiber tax, that's not possible. So we're looking for public and private partnerships, and we're working right now at the Delaware County Chamber with our federal representative, our congressman, to get these projects funded. Thank you.
Our next question is addressed to Lillian, and I think all candidates may be interested in responding to this. Lillian, currently our local government does a Pledge of Allegiance and remains standing for a prayer. Do you plan to continue that tradition?
I am a patriot, and I do stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I do not participate in public prayer, nor will I do so in the future. That said, that's my personal belief system. That does not mean I would ever prevent anybody from practicing their faith any way that they wanted to, saying the pledge, sitting down, standing up. That's your prerogative. And we should have that ability and those rights. We have freedom to religion, not freedom from religion. So I encourage people to practice their faith however they wish.
Joe, your response?
I do, we do, as a town board, say the pledge and then immediately go into a invocation when a pastor is available. It's my belief that if you're in a room, you respect the process. And if everyone's standing, you should respect that. That's all I have to say.
Kevin Armstrong, your thoughts on that?
My response is that I agree with the way we do it. I also respect if somebody doesn't want to. If that's their beliefs, I respect their beliefs also. So I do believe we should continue to do it, offer that. We do the pledge. I definitely think we should do the pledge. That everybody should stand for that. As far as standing for prayer, that's somebody's personal right. If that's what they believe in, that's fine. If they don't, I'm okay with that also.
And this question also directed to Lillian Brown Burdick. Why did you, oh, that's the wrong one. You already answered that. Why did you change your party?
So I will read what was in my opening statement again. I have been a lifelong Republican and left the Republican Party 3 years ago when I saw how town and county GOP or Republican members treated one another and turned on one another when there was a disagreement among them. I believe that we should respect one another and each other's views and engage in civil discourse without character assassination.
I'd like to thank everybody for the wonderful questions here tonight. We also received several questions through email, so we'll now move to that part of the program. Back in 2016, the New York State Controller audited the town of Walton and found that at the time, the supervisor had appointed the town clerk as his bookkeeper. They found that although they had not found any discrepancies, the clerk had incompatible duties with the supervisor's bookkeeping position, so the clerk should not be acting in the position of bookkeeper. The supervisor and town board responded that they were confident that they had numerous internal controls, many of which had been identified in the controller's report. They were more than adequate to prevent, detect any malfeasance on the part of the bookkeeper. Does the clerk still act as bookkeeper today?
Yes.
Okay, Lillian, go ahead.
That was one of the things that I previously addressed, and I am by no means suggesting any malfeasance on the part of the town clerk, who also acts as a bookkeeper. As a matter of fact, she's probably one of the most thorough and efficient town clerks in the entire county, so I'm certainly not suggesting that. But the law is the law. The New York State Comptroller's Office said that we should not have incompatible duties assigned to the same person. That means the town clerk should not act as the bookkeeper. It is not done that way in any other town in the county, nor at the county level. We need to follow the law as cited by the New York State Comptroller.
Joe Sutter, your response?
It's factually incorrect. There is no law that says a town clerk cannot be a bookkeeper. There is no statute in New York that says that. The state comptroller was addressing an opinion from the state comptroller legal office back in the 1950s. They were addressing they were addressing incompatibility back in 1950. So the state comptroller was carried on with that opinion that was cited in 1950. There is no law. There are numerous checks and balances that have been established at our town board level to prevent any fraud or any malfeasance. I appointed her as our bookkeeper because she does do a fabulous job. Number of supervisors before me realized that also. So I just want to make it very clear. There is no law stating that a town clerk cannot be a bookkeeper. Thank you.
This is actually a two-part question.
Kevin would like to answer.
I'd like to respond to that too. We have, the town board has had Rhonda be the bookkeeper for numerous years. She does an excellent job. One of the things to get me, this is an opinion of the state comptroller, they'll tell you that, but they would allow, if Joe wanted his wife to be bookkeeper, they would have no problem with that. To me, that is much more of a conflict than having our town clerk do it than us. Nothing against your wife. But, you know, sometimes the state doesn't use any common sense. We do have numerous safeguards in effect. We always, our audits from the state always come back good reports on that. And that if that's the only thing they can find that they're going to gripe about, then I would continue to have Rhonda be our bookkeeper. Thank you.
I just want to add one other thing. The town board hires a private auditing agency to audit our books every year. Every year. The state audits it periodically. The last time this audit that was referenced was 2016. I'm not sure if there was a state audit after that for the clerk and the supervisor. I know there's been a state audit for the court system recently, but specifically for the clerk and the supervisor, I'm not sure when the last one was, but every single year, the town hires an agency to audit our books, and it's never been discussed. Thank you.
I'd like to respond to that also. Again, I'm not insinuating that there's any malfeasance, and although it may not be a town law, and perhaps we're calling a requirement and a mandate by the state something other than a law, that's perfectly fine. The fact remains that the town of Walton has been out of compliance with the New York State Comptroller's Office since that audit in 2016. Again, I think that there is a good system of checks and balances, but the town remains out of compliance.
This is a two-part question. The same controller's report in 2016 stated the board should conduct an annual audit of the records and reports of any town officer or employee who received or dispersed money on behalf of the town or engage an independent public accountant to do so. The town responded that they issued a request for proposal seeking an independent public accountant to conduct the annual audit. Is that still in place today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I just answered that, yes. We get audited every year by independent auditor.
Any further discussion on that? Delaware County has received $8 million in American Rescue Plan Act fund from the federal government. This is for both supervisor candidates, which come with a deadline and stipulations to spend those funds. In your opinion, what would be the best use for these funds? Lillian?
It's not just the county that's received that $8.5 million. The town has also received, I think, $226,000 allocation, of which we've already received the first installment, $113,000. I think the community and Walton residents should be engaged in how that money is to be used. The point of the legislation when those funds were allocated was not to fund budget line items that could be funded through another means. There is an infrastructure component. We don't have infrastructure in the town other than our roads and bridges. So that is a potential use for those funds, but as I said previously, I don't think a potential use for those funds or appropriate use for those funds is to establish a paid ambulance service. Instead, I'd like to see the community really engaged in how they would like to see those funds used to promote tourism, to promote Walton, to help our businesses that have suffered through the pandemic with lost revenue. And I don't know what those answers are or what that solution or plan might look like, but I really feel like the town residents need to be involved in the decision-making process. We have really smart people in our community, and I think we should rely on their expertise to help guide the decisions of the town.
Joe, your response.
First, Delaware County. Today I actually was in a committee meeting with a number of supervisors and other people from the county looking at ways to spend that. So there's been recently there was a committee established that I was invited to sit on at the county level. We have spoken recently at the town level of establishing a committee with 2 supervisors and inviting a couple of the town residents to sit on that committee to do exactly the same thing the county's doing. Find projects, what would be the best use for that RPTL money, and specifically focus on potential tourism type activities. So That committee will be established shortly, and when we, either at the next board meeting or the following board meeting, we'll let the town residents know who is on that committee. And again, the community has their say. You can email us, stop in the office. If you have ideas for that money to be spent, please let us know. Now, there's a process. We have to identify the project, ensure that it complies with the guidelines of spending that money, which we have contracted with a firm that if we have a specific project, we'll contact that firm and they'll give us the yes or no. It falls within that guideline. So we are going to establish that committee very soon. Thank you.
Our next question, again directed to both supervisor candidates. What has hit your community hardest during the pandemic, and what plans do you have to remedy that? Joe Sutter?
I think that the hardest hit is the unknown, the misinformation that's coming out of Washington and the media is one of the hardest things that I've heard. You can wear a mask, let's shorten the curve, let's beat the curve, that type of stuff. So this past year and a half, almost 2 years now, it's gone back and forth. And I think it gives our community, as well as the rest of the state and nation, that sense of unknowing. Throw in the Delta variant and it's still unknown. I am the only supervisor of the 19 supervisors who have put out 5 or 6 public service announcements addressing that very issue. And if you feel like it, get your immunization. I would be totally against mandating vaccinations, but I think just the unknown is what hits our community the hardest. Thank you.
Lillian Brown Burdick?
So there's not just one particular thing that has hit our community the hardest. There are a number of things. One of the biggest things that I've seen as a result of this pandemic is something that was meant to assist our residents in our communities, which has done a huge disservice to our business owners. Because of federal unemployment checks, where people were making more money to stay home and not work rather than go back to work, we've created not just a supply chain issue, but a workforce issue. That was catastrophic, and it still continues today. Another issue that we had for the people who were working, our emergency responders, our required personnel, they had to now all of a sudden deal with childcare issues because schools were shuttered. So there were multiple problems as a result of the pandemic, some of which still have not been addressed, some of which are starting to be addressed in terms of federal dollars being allocated for childcare. With regard to the businesses being hurt for lack of a workforce, I think the market will correct that issue on its own. As far as what we can do to solve some of those problems is, again, to advocate with our federal and state elected representatives for access to programs and funding for our residents.
Again, this question is directed to both supervisor candidates. If elected supervisor, do you think the town of Walton should have more compensation for the landfill? Lillian Brown Burdick?
Walton is the host community for the Delaware County Solid Waste Facility, and don't call it a landfill or Sue McIntyre will be very mad.
I only say what I read.
I'm not sure that we should be receiving additional money. I'm not sure exactly what it is that we are receiving. I do know that the town of Walton does negotiate every year or every few years for a percentage increase. What I do know is that the solid waste facility does operate very efficiently, and it has also implemented new ways to dispose of our refuse, of our garbage, to make sure that we continue to have a landfill for our lives and for the lives of our children. I'm not sure charging additional fees to the county for disposal of leachate or whatever it is that we charge for is really the right idea, especially coming out of a pandemic. It's something that I would really have to study and look into to see what the mechanics are for the funding and the community host benefit.
Joe Sutta?
Community host benefit was established in 1994. And part of that agreement was it will be renegotiated every 5 years. That host community benefit agreement has not been renegotiated. John Meredith, former supervisor, started the process. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. The next supervisor didn't do anything. And then my predecessor, Charlie Gregory, started the process. And we know what happened to Charlie. I took it upon myself thinking, I hope there isn't 3 strikes and I'm out. But we did start renegotiating that after 25 years. We kind of hit a snag with the COVID, but as soon as we clear this hurdle, we're going to re-engage with that host community benefit package. I believe Walton deserves more from that landfill sited in our town than what we are currently receiving. But it is a process. It's a hard, long, arduous process. So I am going to continue that, and hopefully we'll have a renegotiated host community benefit package within the next year. Thank you.
Next question, if the Department of Environmental Conservation moves forward with a stream side acquisition program, what will you do to protect Walton's industrial and economic expansion? Joe Sutta?
I don't think they're gonna in Walton because sentiments of our board are firm that we're gonna vote against it. And again, it's a community vote, specifically for the individual community. The village has their own vote, the towns have their own vote. So from the sentiments that I've talked to with our board, no more further land acquisition, whether it's stream side or regular land acquisition. I would vote against it. Thank you.
Lillian Brown Burdick.
I am also opposed to further land acquisition in the watershed. This streamside acquisition program is just another layer to the land acquisition program funded by New York City for water quality preservation. The town doesn't have a say. If you live in the town and you want to sell your property to the city, you can. There is nothing stopping you from doing that. Joe is correct when he says that the village is really at risk. I inquired with the village office today to see if there was a hamlet extension area that was designated after 1997 with the MOA, and I'm still looking to see if that information is available. Here's what I can say. There is a means for Delaware County supervisors, whether I'm on the board or not, to put a stop to this, and that's through the renegotiation of the Memorandum of Agreement with New York City starting next March, where we can ask for a land swap or a buyback in exchange for some of that land acquisition that has occurred in our communities. New York City said that it would stop land acquisition after purchasing 30% of the county real estate. We are now at 28%. We're almost out of property, folks, and Walton has no more buildable property. There are means to circumvent this and actually get the city to work with us in order to get some of that property back on our tax rolls. but our supervisors must negotiate.
Next question again for both supervisor candidates. What will you do to ensure Walton doesn't lose any more taxable property to Delaware County and New York City? Lillian?
Well, I just spoke about the land acquisition and streamside acquisition and what my plans are there, and I'd really like to see the Board of Supervisors negotiate in good faith for the future of our county and our towns. As far as expanding our tax base, let's not scare businesses away. There is I would dare say, a multi-million-dollar business in the town right now who's just had its tax-exempt status refused to be acknowledged by the town, which has now put the town residents on the hook for legal fees and a potential settlement. The case is in court right now. When this business has said that it would pay the land taxes in lieu, it would make a payment in lieu of taxes. We can't scare businesses away and be an unfriendly community to business. And one of the ways is, first of all, you can't revoke their tax exempt status, but not recognizing it is just incomprehensible to me when it's lawful. I think that we need to make efforts to encourage people to come to our community and to open businesses in our community and be more business friendly.
Joe, your response?
Again, she's factually incorrect. That business that she's discussing is on Dunk Hill, and in order to be a 501c3 and get the tax exempt status, you also have to own the property. The property was owned by a real estate holding company. They don't fall under the real estate laws. They are taxable. So we did pull the tax exempt status. She's factually incorrect. It is not in court. We are negotiating. They're willing to change the legal status of who owns the property. And if they do that to the 501c3 actually owning the property, then the exemption will be reinstated. But that property currently is owned by a real estate holding company. They don't fall under tax exempt status. So, however, we are negotiating with almost like what we're looking for, a pilot. If they do change it to a 501c3, so the 501c3, which can be tax exempt, and they officially, through procedures to become tax exempt, they are willing to negotiate can't say pilot, but a type of agreement for taxes for the town of Walton. Thank you.
This question once again to both supervisor candidates. Delaware County's current legislative government model dates back to the 1700s. Do you think it's time to reform that model to make it a more representative form of government? Joe Sutta?
I think I represent the people of the town of Walton very well, both at the town level and the county level. The only other representative form of government that I can think that maybe they're referencing is take a county like Chenango County or Boone County. Their supervisors in those towns are not the county legislators. They have their own legislators that represent their towns at the county level. So that's the only thing I'm thinking that's what the question is gearing toward. But I think we as our board represent our constituents here in the town of Walton very well, both, again, at town level and county level. Thank you.
Lillian Brown Burdick?
I disagree with Joe on this one. I do think that we need a different form of county government, and that should come in the form of a county manager and legislative districts, which is done in Otsego County and neighboring Sullivan County. The system works very well, but there are still supervisors in the towns that represent multiple towns that form a district. But to run the day-to-day operations, they have a county manager, and I really feel that that is something that should be explored at the county level.
Our next question, once again, to both supervisor candidates. Some people are concerned about gentrification in your area and lack of affordable housing. To both supervisor candidates, how would you address these concerns? Lillian?
Affordable housing is a problem throughout the county, not just in the town of Walton. The recent uptick in real estate sales because of the pandemic, with people coming from the metro areas, has placed home ownership out of reach for many younger families. Also, rents in Walton and Delaware County seem to follow HUD cycles, which does not keep pace with the average wage that is earned in the town of Walton. So it's a cycle that needs to be broken, but again, the market will correct the issue. One of the ways that that can be addressed is through the expansion of federal low-income and first-time home buyers programs, which are federally funded and currently in play in the town and the village and throughout the Delaware County. I'd like to see an expansion to that. But again, one of the other ways to address the shortage of housing is to negotiate with New York City to get some of this property, developable property, back on the tax rolls through land swaps or buybacks, with the renegotiation of the MOA, which starts in March. That will return property to our tax rolls where we can look at opportunities for new construction. Another creative idea is to offer, when available as an incentive, is to offer tax breaks, if you will, on new construction for a certain period of time to encourage people to build homes, to allow for more home ownership and also for more affordable rentals.
Once again, our next question to both supervisor candidates. Many areas are struggling with a lack of EMS service. How do you plan to fix this issue? Joe?
Like mentioned before, I was fortunate to be on part of the committee that that was working with this entity that is trying to form a paid ambulance service, and will continue to work with that entity as much as I can to help implement a paid service. So it's already in the process. Hopefully we can follow through with that, and we as a town board have discussed it several times. But when that committee comes to the town board, if we can help facilitate moving forward with that, the whole town board has already kind of nodded, yeah, we will do what we need to do to help facilitate that. Thank you.
Lillian?
Again, emergency medical services, ambulance services, it's an issue that is not unique to Walton. This problem exists throughout the county. And as I previously said, this should not be addressed by the town alone. This should be addressed by the county. We have very smart, capable, and qualified people, such as our Director of Emergency Services, Steve Hood, and the Director of the Planning Department, Shelley Bennett, who have the ability to write grants to get us started and to make paid service more equitable and sustainable. That being said, I don't think that we should discount our volunteers that we have with our ambulance squad. As I mentioned previously, I have spoken with certain members of the ambulance squad, and they wish to continue their service as volunteers, and I can only hope that there will be a collaboration between paid service and volunteer service.
Our next question, again for both supervisor candidates. and we'll start with Joe. What is your plan for job creation?
I was just in a meeting and I spoke about this very thing with Glenn Nealis, working collaboratively with the economic development. For instance, we are working to bring in a new business. Actually, it's been a few years now, but because of COVID, it has kind of slowed down a little bit, but it has recently come back on the table about a meat processing facility. So working with economic development and of course our chamber, collaboratively working to discuss ways to get new businesses into our community. For instance, the IDA just acquired the property formerly known as Sheffield's Estates. So there is a movement toward getting a business into that area, similar to what we're working at for the current industrial development area on South Street. So I think that's the best point. The best process is to work with the chamber and the county economic development agency to facilitate new businesses coming to Walton. Thank you.
This next question is for, Lily, did I give you a chance to speak?
I didn't.
Please.
Does Kevin get to speak too?
Next
or-
question.
Oh.
If you'd like to. Kevin, you can speak anytime, but you're definitely in the next
Can
one.
you just repeat that question?
Yes. All I have to do is find it.
Oh, something about
Encouraging
job
new
creation.
business.
Yes,
Job
what
creation.
is your plan for job creation? Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, so Joe is referring to the Delaware County Department of Economic Development. Let's not discount the Delaware County Chamber, who works hand in hand with the Economic Development Department and the IDA, which is an organization that I work very closely with, that has worked very hard to bring manufacturing and industry back to Walton. One of the things that inhibits Walton from really thriving in the business district is that our business district is our Main Street, our Delaware Street, is in the floodplain, as is much property in Walton. One of the things that we can do is continue the great work of the Walton Flood Commission that is spearheaded by the Delaware County Soil and Water Conservation District to continue with flood mitigation projects to help lower that floodplain, which in turn will help lower flood insurance rates to make our Main Street, our business, more affordable. Even though it's in the village rather than the town, the village is part of the town, and we need to remember that we are all in this together and we should all be working together for the sustainability and to help Walton thrive.
This next question is for all candidates. President John F. Kennedy once said, "Let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer." Kevin, we'll start with you. Can you commit to seeking bipartisan solutions, putting country, and in this case the town, over party, and doing your part to help us unite here at home to accomplish the tasks before us?
Definitely. I have never looked at things as Republican or Democrat. I've always looked at what was best for the town, so that's my feelings on it.
Lily?
Absolutely, and that's why I'm running on the Walton First line. We need to put Walton first. Again, this election is not about Republicans or Democrats, it's about Walton. I had previously mentioned that through my employment, I have developed really good working professional relationships with our assemblyman, our state senator, and our congressional representative, where we have open lines of communication to make a case for funding and programs to come into Walton. Unlike others, I don't criticize people for their party affiliation, and I would hope that we all are aligned in our desire to see Walton thrive outside of party lines.
Next question to Supervisor Setta.
Can I?
Oh, please, sorry.
For the 3 years I've been on the town board and also on the county board, not once has it ever been mentioned that, oh, she's a Democrat or he's a Democrat or independent. So I'm not sure how to answer that question because it doesn't happen. I have yet to hear anyone say, oh, she's a Democrat or he's a Democrat or independent. So I sit next to two Democrats at the county level during Board of Supervisors meeting, and they're great guys. We got a great working relationship. And it just never comes up that he's a Democrat or he's a Democrat or I'm a Republican. I just don't understand that question and why it was risen. So, but that's my take.
Our next question to Supervisor Joe Setta. What would you say you have been able to accomplish since taking office?
We've kept like Kevin mentioned in his opening statement, we've kept the tax cap on the budget below the requirement of 2%. What is not widely known is we actually can go up to this year, 4.3%, something like that, because you get some return if you keep it below from the previous year. So, but we're in the process of the budget, and it's going to be below 2% this year, or for 22. Back in 2016, 16 timeline, our assessed value, total assessed value was $367 million. The next year it dropped $6 million. I'm proud to say that working with our assessor, we have brought that total assessment back up to $375 million. Now, what's that mean? When you drop the total assessment, somebody's got to make up for that tax loss. And, I've had a statement numerous times at the town board level that, poor Mrs. Smith, who's on Social Security, has to make up for that. And I just don't like that. So working with the town board and the assessor, we have brought that total tax assessment value of the town of Walton back up to $375 million, which eases some of the tax burden on the Mrs. Smiths who are on fixed income. What else have we done here? Again, we've mentioned several flood mitigation projects, which in turn have lowered the flood insurance in some areas, which allow people to buy houses without having to pay a substantial amount of flood insurance. And there's numerous other things, but I'll yield back.
Lily, anything you'd like to say?
I'm sorry, what
Was there anything you'd like to say?
Question was by
What would you say you have been able to accomplish? I asked Supervisor Setta what he feels he accomplished since taking office.
That was a question that was directed to Joe. I don't
Just
think
wanted to give you an
anybody was
opportunity.
asking me. Okay,
No,
thank
I
you.
just wanted to give
That's
you the
why I wasn't
opportunity.
paying attention to whoever was mentioning that.
Do you think, and this is for both supervisor candidates, do you think the Main Street is healthy and successful? If not, what needs to change? Lillian Brown verdict?
The Main Street, which is Delaware Street, is the business district, which is in the village, not in the town. And I think our town board, our trustees, and mayor have a better handle on what's happening in the village. That being said, there are things that we can do with the town working with the village, which simply does not happen, to improve the health of the business district. We can continue with flood mitigation projects, again, to lower the floodplain, which in turn lowers the, through the community rating system, will in turn lower flood insurance premiums. That's one thing that we can continue to do. Also, years ago, there was a community group that look toward beautification efforts. And even though that's going on to some degree, I think more of that can continue. The Walton Chamber has also been instrumental in helping our business district thrive. And so our business district has expanded, not just from Delaware Street, but on over to West Street. So we're re-envisioning the way our business district looks and moving in a positive direction.
Joe?
I had a very good working relationship with the previous village administration. We actually applied for a grant to fund a design for walking trail down on Water Street. And working with the previous administration, at that point we did not get funded for it, but we submitted another application in excess of $600,000 to do that collaborative effort to build a walking trail which would enhance tourism and a number of other tourism type projects. I'm not sure what the common denominator is, but I understand that the 4 previous supervisors had issues with the village government. I'm not sure, again, I'm not sure what the common denominator is, but again, I had a good working relationship, and I am still committed to developing a good working relationship with the current administration to look at tourism type projects such as that Water Street walking trail area. Thank you.
This question goes to all 3 candidates. We'll start with
I
Kevin.
wanted to answer that one.
Oh, Kevin.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in the past, we have had not always the best relationship with the village, but we have, like our highway department and the village public works department work well together. We have shared service agreement with them. We share equipment and stuff. Also, when the town did Veterans Plaza, that area, and we got a grant, we used part of that grant to pave the village parking lot down there. So we have worked together. You know, granted, we could have a better relationship, and hopefully we will in the future. We can work on that. So I just saying that we never have is wrong. We have had a relationship working with them.
Next question for all candidates. What is your opinion on cannabis sales and on-site consumption? Do you view the legislation as an unfunded mandate, and if so, why? Kevin?
I am open to it. I wouldn't make any decision on it until the state lets us know what all the regulations and mandates are. Right now, we don't know what they are. And to go into blind would just be irresponsible on the town board. That's why we voted not to allow. We can switch that in the future if they get around to telling us what all these mandates and stuff are going to be. I would be open to it, but until then, I'm not. And I'd also like to say to just let that decision sit there idle and let it. That's just saying you're going to let it go through and not stand up for what you think is right by saying yes or no. So, which we did not do that. We made the decision within the time frame we had. We had, I think, till December 31st, but you have to have public hearings and stuff. There's a timeline to do that. That's why we made our decision when we did.
Lily?
I don't think it's any secret that I am in favor of all legal businesses. And in New York State, whether you like it or not, cannabis sales and consumption and possession are legal. Now, that said, opting out, I don't believe was the right move for the town. The town signaled its intent to opt out in advance of the public hearing, which flies in the face of the need for a public hearing. By doing so, we were removed from the potential of receiving sales tax revenue that we could potentially share with the village if a business opted to open in Walton. Now, will a cannabis sales retail establishment and dispensary open in Walton? It's not likely. Those licenses are extremely expensive and they have to be renewed every year. But to say that the regulations are not available is something of a misnomer. There are regulations and there is policy on the books already, and there's policy being formed. I would encourage all of you to join the Delaware County Chamber of Commerce on October 21st. A member of the Cannabis Control Board is giving a presentation to Delaware County residents, which will tell the policy, procedure, process that has already been undertaken. And I encourage people to really do their own research. After all, if cannabis were a gateway drug, and that's a lot of the argument that I'm hearing for that, you know what? Twinkies are a gateway food. Does that mean that we should tell Jim Groff to take them off the grocery store shelves? Of course not, because it's legal.
Time.
I support all legal business.
Tara, do we have time to take some live questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. Oh, I didn't need to cut you off.
We as a town board did discuss it early on, and we opted out because you can always opt in. And our premise was there are no rules and regulations. No one here can show me statutes that the legislators have passed in reference to cannabis sales and consumption, because it hasn't happened yet. Now, did they finally establish a cannabis committee to give the legislators recommendations on rules and regulations? Evidently. But they haven't passed any rules or regulations, no statutes as of yet. Now remember, we can always opt in. And one of my things is, I am not willing to subject the town taxpayers to potential unfunded mandates. And here's just a for instance. Are we gonna have to send our police force out periodically to monitor those sales areas? Are we gonna have to send our code enforcement officer out periodically to monitor those sales areas? Number one, we don't have a full-time code enforcement officer. Number two, we don't have a police force. Does that mean we would have to establish a police force? Now, these are just hypotheticals, but I don't trust Albany specifically when it comes to unfunded mandates. And that was the premise. We don't know what these potential unfunded mandates may come out of this cannabis legislation that they're proposing. So thank you.
We do have a few questions for all candidates. Are there other issues in Walton that have not been addressed in this questions that you hope to remedy if elected? Lillian, let's start with you.
One of the things that I would really like the town board to accomplish, and one of my goals if I'm elected, is to formulate a up-to-date comprehensive plan that reflects our changing community and demographics. It's just common sense to have a document that helps guide good governance. And we're not using that now, not at the town level and certainly not at the county level. We need to include all of our residents in our in governing the town. We need to include everybody and not exclude people. I'd also like to see the town make more of an effort to communicate with the public through updated technological means. Why are we not broadcasting Zoom and having to request permission to get on to a Zoom call rather than attend in person? There are ways that we can make our government work much more efficiently with very little or no cost to the municipalities and in turn to the taxpayers, and I would like to be part of that effort.
Joe?
I did address a little bit, but we collaboratively with the village applied for a grant in excess of $600,000 for that walking trail down on Water Street. We need to form a committee, look at the current design that was submitted with that application, and make changes as such in anticipation of receiving those funds or some of those funds to at least start that project. I think working toward tourism type activities such as that is the best approach for our community. And again, working collaboratively with the village government and a committee of residents to look at that project and move forward with it in anticipation of those funds being received. All right, thank you.
Again, this question for both supervisor candidates. If elected, what would you do to put your town on a firmer financial footing? Did I just ask that question?
No.
Okay.
You're gonna have to repeat that. 'Cause
Okay. If elected, what would you do to put your town on a firmer financial footing? Joe?
I guess that question would be an assumption that Walton, the town of Walton, is in financial difficulties, which it is not. We do not have any taxes that aren't, any, what's that word I'm looking for? We do not have any debt service. I'm sorry. We have had very favorable luck keeping our tax base and our taxes low. To get it on a firmer footing, unless you want to raise taxes, or I don't see the need at this point to have that as a focus. Our focus right now, again, would be to keep the taxes low and keeping our budget in compliance with the tax cap. That's about it, thanks.
Lillian?
Answer this one.
Yeah, I will speak on this one.
I concur. I have looked at budgets and the auditing reports for the town of Walton. In the past quarter of a century, they have been stellar, to say the least. So we're really in a good financial position. That said, it doesn't mean that there's not room to do more. One of the things that we can do, as I mentioned, and I'm going to go back to this because I'd really like to see it done, is when we start negotiating that MOA, we have to ask our supervisors to advocate that property gets returned to our tax rolls through land swaps or buybacks. I've heard many supervisors say, "Oh well, there's nothing we can do. We can't fight the city or city hall, right? We can't fight the city." Actually, we can. We need somebody who's going to stand up for Walton residents and for Delaware County and not cave into pressure for favor from political committees or to make friends. There's more that can be done, but we are in a good financial position, and I would like to see that continue through shared services with the neighboring towns, with the village, and with the county. There are always opportunities for growth and expansion.
Kevin?
I'd just like to say that we are on good financial, terms or whatever footing. We have, like I said in my opening statement, we've done different things to remain that way. When I first got on the board back in 1997, whenever the town needed a piece of equipment like a plow truck or something, like they went out and bonded it. I thought that was kind of ridiculous to pay interest on that and push to get a dedicated equipment reserve fund, which we do have now. We have a reserve fund, and we also put money in the budget each year for equipment. That's one of the ways that we've remained that way. We've also been very aggressive in our gravel bank. We leased a gravel bank from McGibbon's, a neighboring property. We've been aggressive getting that out. We've been really aggressive in buying federal surplus equipment. That's helped. When you're talking probably $250,000 to $300,000 for a new plow truck, the last couple that we've got and converted over, we've had about 100 or 120. So we're always looking at ways to save money. Our last 10-wheeler truck that we just bought, we purchased from a neighboring town, which also saved us probably $150,000 for a truck that was only like like 3 years old. So we look at ways every meeting to, to try to save the taxpayers money and remain in the situation we are. Like I said, we have no long-term debt or anything, and I feel that, this board will remain that way.
Our final question we have tonight is for the question for both supervisor candidates. Clear cell phone coverage is an important aspect of a thriving community. Without coverage, we are at a significant disadvantage. This is also a great issue during emergency situations. Floods happen often in our county. What will you do to address this concern? Lillian Brown Burdick.
Okay, I've already addressed this, but I would like to say again, this problem is not unique to Walton, it's throughout the county. And it is not just a personal life safety issue, it's also an issue for economic development. Many people are unable to access a cell signal, and it creates all kinds of problems, including death. We had 2 residents in Andes who perished while they had cell phones in their hands trying to call 911 a few years back because there was no cell phone service. It has to be addressed, but this is a private industry issue, and through my day job, through my work, I have been working with our congressional representative for a private-public partnership to allocate more dollars to cell phone coverage. We're pretty good on broadband and high-speed internet, but there are opportunities here, including the use of our communication towers in the county. We already have the infrastructure here, we just need the next piece. Here's the problem. We don't have someone from the county who has yet asked the question, who has offered the incentive. Let's not charge Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile or any of our other carriers out there a fee for these use of towers for the first year or first 2 years as an incentive to go live with a signal, which will benefit everybody, not just for public safety, but also for economic development.
Joe?
We are very fortunate in Walton to have adequate cell phone service. Depending on the carrier that you have or subscriber that you have, for instance, Verizon comes in spotty, but AT&T and the others come in very good because of that cell phone tower we have here, which does bring in substantial revenue to the town. As far as the county level, emergency services has petitioned cell phone carriers to go on our tower. They're still in the process of doing that. But I can tell you right now, Verizon has basically said, no, we're not coming in. Verizon will not come to a community such as Delaware County because it just doesn't service. There's not enough services to be provided by Verizon. The other services, the emergency services, because we have the new 13 or 14 emergency services towers that would accept cell phone service, they are working toward that in conjunction with the committee, the emergency services committee, to try and get those carriers on those towers. But it's a long process. But again, specifically to Walton, we're very fortunate. You go to Tompkins, not so much. You go to Masonville, not so much. But again, we're very fortunate to have relatively good cell phone service in Walton. Thanks.
Ron, can I respond to that? I'd just like to say that part of the problem with cell phone service, I do agree that we need it. It's just like when you want to make a 911 call, you want to be able to make it on your cell phone, and you want ambulance service to be there. But part of the problem is the not in my backyard mentality that some people have. When we put our cell phone in, it created a legal battle between the town of Walton and the village of Walton. So, if the municipalities can't even agree on it, imagine the problems we're going to have when somebody wants to put one out next to some neighbor that doesn't want one, or neighbors that don't want one. So, until that issue is addressed, it's going to be an uphill battle to get more towers in.
That brings us to the end of our questions tonight, and some wonderful questions from the audience. At this time, the candidates have the opportunity for a 2-minute closing statement in the same order as the opening statements. We will start with Lillian Brown Burdick, then Joe Setta, and Kevin Armstrong. Lillian?
So I'd like to use a portion of this time to respond to some of the comments that were made about me being factually incorrect. That is not true. There is a lawsuit that is pending in Delaware County Supreme Court that was before the court on October 13th with regard to that Dunk Hill business. So that's not exactly true. But I don't want to spend a lot of time on discounting some of the statements that were made, because I do believe that we have more in common and we agree on more issues than we disagree on. After all, we do want what's best for Walton, to improve the quality of life for all of our residents. And I disagree with Joe about cell phone coverage. Apparently, he's not been on 206 headed out toward Bainbridge or Route 10, where there is not cell phone coverage, and many of our residents are driving to other towns to work or to shop. It's just a dangerous situation. That being said, I want to thank everybody for your investment in this election process. And again, thank you to the Chamber and to the Grange. And I'd like to encourage you all to get out and vote on November 2nd. Early voting does start on October 23rd at the Delaware County Board of Elections at 3 Gallant Avenue. And finally, I just want to remind people, I'm not running against anyone, I'm running for Walton. Please vote for me on November 2nd.
Thank you, Lillian. Joe Setta?
We are very fortunate to have the town council that we have. We're very fortunate to have the clerk, the assessor, and the highway superintendent for Walton. Over the last couple decades, they have kept us financially stable, and again, we are very fortunate to have that. I'm not sure what dissension at the county level between GOP is. I go to every single board meeting up there, and I have, like I mentioned before, I have yet to witness any dissension. We do act as a team up there. But yeah, we do have some disagreements, but I don't think it's as strong as what was previously stated, unless I just missed it. I don't know. Backstabbing, whatever. It isn't happening at the county level as far as I'm concerned. Again, I want to thank the Chamber for hosting this. You guys have been doing a great job over the number of years hosting this. It allows the community to ask these questions. It puts us on the spot. This is good. This is good. I hope it continues. Ron, thank you. Thank you very much for moderating this. Stalwart of our community. Great choice, Chamber, for having him moderate it. Again, we're very fortunate to have the board we have. I'd like to continue working with our board. And again, in my opening statement, I encourage you, get out and vote. Tell your friends to get out and vote. And I would encourage you to tell your friends to get out and vote for me November 2nd, 2021. Again, thank you very much for showing up, you guys.
Kevin Armstrong.
I'd like to thank the Chamber again for letting us express our opinions and views on things, and thank the Grange again for having this here. It's been my pleasure and honor to serve the town of Walton for over 30 years between the Planning and Zoning Board and the Town Council. I've worked with 5 different supervisors and numerous board members, 3 different highway superintendents, 2 different town clerks, different judges, and it's been an enjoyable experience dealing with all of them. We don't always see eye to eye, but our board usually, we come together and do what's right, we think is best for Walton. And I look forward to another 4 years serving the town of Walton. Thank you.
reminder, voting takes place November 2nd at the Walton School Bus Garage. We urge everyone, of course, to get out and vote. Can we get a really nice, warm hand for these three panels who did a great job tonight? Again, thank you to Walton Grange, who does an amazing job setting up a program like this. It's not easy. It takes a lot of people doing a lot of work, and we really appreciate it. The community thanks you for your time. Thank you for the Walton Grange for giving us an opportunity to have this program here. And thanks to not only the people who are on hand tonight, but also the viewers on Zoom and Facebook Live. I'm Ron Golling, moderator. Good evening. Have a good night. I like your chances.